Hello, this is Linda Vetris Nichols, evolutionaryhealer.com, and I have with me the most amazing person, Lisa Marie Platske. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here, Linda.
Sweet. I'm so great to have you too. All right. So, Lisa, you have this amazing story of transformation. I love it. It's such a funny story where you show up on your very first job in customs and you're dressed like what? Not even a typical teenager. Why don't you share your story with us? It's awesome. And now you're doing like these amazing things on stage, and you have a really great story to share.
Thank you. Yeah, my background is not the typical entrepreneurial journey. I don't know, maybe there isn't a typical entrepreneurial journey, but I will say that for me, to go from working in federal law enforcement to actually opening my own business, that's just not it's not the typical path that most people go on. And certainly for me, I had the red, white, and blue nails and the guest sneakers at the academy. And so it was a different beginning till I actually made the leap in opening the business. And I always get the question, why? Why? Like, how do you do that? How do you go from strapping on a gun, putting on some black boots and working on the piers in New York to opening up a leadership training company? And to me, it just that seems natural. I mean, that seems totally natural. But the truth is that it was through marriage that brought me to that. And that's something that a lot of people don't know, that my husband and I had lived in different states. And, I lived one place, he lived someplace else, and we never lived near each other. And when he proposed, I just figured I'd keep working in the government and he'd keep working. And I was living in Dallas, Texas, and he was in California. And one of my friends said, people who get married usually live in the same household. And so,
Oh,
that was kind of right. Exactly. Oh, and so, but we had done this, for several years. And so it just felt natural. And so the decision to open up the business and, move out of law enforcement and really take that transformational leap came from the desire to live my values. And so if family is important, and if, really honoring that, it meant that working in two competing careers would be incredibly difficult. And I think that that's something that a lot of people face in their life is, how do I do it? How do I make the choices? What's really most important? And can I do that? Can I choose to, have the career that I want, have the family life that I want? I think it's something that a lot of people really struggle with.
right.
Make that happen, create that for themselves.
Absolutely.
So a lot within the journey there, but that's a real brief, beginning point that I thought was important to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And you showed up on the job your first day. What did you have? What were your nails like?
Oh,
Just do the description.
oh yeah, they were red, white, and blue, and and they were long. I mean, my nails now are very short, but they were long nails, and I had long hair, and it was, up in a ponytail, very, very cute, very fashionable. And,
For the time.
absolutely, and cute.
That's funny.
Cute guest sneakers, not your typical, combat boots. And, I was law enforcement Barbie, Linda, oh yeah. So.
That's right. And then you wouldn't let the guys swear on the job. I mean, you were just alpha through all of that. They teased you and you just didn't take it, and you alphaed them. I love that. You're a leader.
Well, I told them that, this is, the United States of America, the government, and you are a representative. And so profanity is not, and, of course, I mean, I'm on the piers of New York, and this is not landing, certainly just, joyfully and with open arms. It's definitely,
You're right.
a few different eyebrows raised. But gosh, I think such a great message for what we're going to talk about today, which is, even if you go up against the grain and if you're doing something, if you're authentically yourself, you know,
Right.
how do you use your individual attractor factor to be able to get things done in the world, whatever your calling is? And
Ooh.
so for me, it would have been inauthentic for me to allow, F bombs all over the place, and it would have been inauthentic for me to have showed up differently and to kind of fake it as if I was this tough broad. And it would have been inauthentic for me to do other things. Now, of course, in all, humor aside, there were things that certainly I, could have done better. I will 100% it, I'll admit that,
Yeah.
and that's part of my lessons learned that I can share today with regards to positioning. So I'm
Wonderful.
grateful for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's what you're going over. It's believe you are enough. I love that one. Stand out versus fit. I'm commenting on as well. And then this is so cool because you're so good at this positioning and how it's not visibility. So I can't wait to get into this. Let's move on. Okay, so believe you are enough. Tell us more about that.
Well, those the elements that you just spoke about, those three elements, are really important to your attractor factor. And believe you're enough is really the core piece. And so much about that is believing that the imperfection that you have, whatever it is that you believe is imperfect about you, is absolutely perfect. And it's necessary. My, imperfections are going to be different than yours or my next door neighbors or my husband's, and yet they're all perfectly designed. And when in order for us to truly believe that we're enough, we have to be okay with those. And that's really what allows us to be authentic and to be genuine. When I'm able to take that being perfect and imperfection and meld that into being vulnerable, expression of my experience and my humanity, that's what that allows people to connect with me, to be attracted to me. If I look at others in the world and say, oh my gosh, he or she is so perfect, I could never live up to that, the connection, the deep sense of connection, it's difficult to happen because I don't understand. I don't understand how somebody can be so perfect. And so, understanding the enoughness about the imperfection allows it to be used as a tool through sharing it in a very vulnerable way, enabling connection to happen, and really have you be more desirable and more attractive to others. And oftentimes people will say, well, how do I do that? And so really the action around that is, what I call the 5-5-5, and that is 5 minutes in the morning, to really identify what is it, that if I was going to show up in my full expression of myself, what would that look like? If I look through my day and I think about my appointments, what would that actually look like? And then, in the middle of the day at lunchtime to say, okay, so, where have I done that? Where have I, really stood for my own value of being enough? And where, could I do better moving into the next part of the day? And then at the end of the day, 5 more minutes. So it's really 5, 5, and 5. And it may be sometimes a little bit less than that. But I think a lot of times people set these really huge, huge pieces of, I have to just, suck it up and believe that I'm enough. And people tell me, yes, you're good enough. But there's I think a sensitiveness to the awareness that you can create with checking in with yourself and say, where am I hiding right now? And where am I showing up? And is there the element that's sneaking in there that I believe that I'm not good enough for this opportunity, this conversation, this whatever.
Right. I love it. 5-5-5. Good one. Okay. So, then stand out versus fit in. What do you mean? What's the difference to standing out versus fitting in? I think you touched on it already, but take us deeper.
Well, that's my core message. That's really my core message. And it's been a lesson learned for me as somebody who has been a really good hider in life and
Mm.
wanting to fit in. And so my saying is the world is made for those who stand out, not those who fit in. And this for me came as a little child, as a little girl, and little girl who went to Catholic school, and there were hundreds of kids that were there, and there were only two children in the entire school that had single family homes when I grew up. And so I wanted so much to, be like every other kid and have the mom and the dad, and I would do anything to just blend, if you will. And that means, and things like that carry on. We do that unintentionally. It's not necessarily intentional. It's interesting because even for today, I have to say that I'm very much somebody who's mindful of being put together, right? And so I had my hair fixed, and very similar to what you see in the picture. And I had my hair, really, and I said, you know what? Because we're talking about your attractor factor and we're talking about this idea of unintentionally hiding, I did something that I normally would only do with my girlfriends. I would never do on a business video like this. And that is put my hair back in these little clips. And so you can see all of my face and I'm not hiding. And so sometimes we do that with clothing. Sometimes we do it with words. Sometimes we do it with saying yes to opportunities. I do an annual Leadership Success Summit Design Your Destiny live event every January. And
Cool.
last year, it is cool. It is very cool. And last year I got on stage and, one of my clients called me up and said, it was on day one and it was at the end of the day. And she said to me, that was very interesting what you wore on at the event, right? And I had this long ballroom gown, and then I had this wrap. And what I realized is when I was standing in the room and I had put the gown on, I was very self-conscious about how my arms looked in it. And we do that. We have these conversations in our heads. And so I grabbed the closest wrap, and it was a nightmare because during my presentation, the wrap is different sizes. It's all over the place. I'm trying to write on a flip chart. It was a nightmare, but it was my way of hiding on stage. Nobody
Right.
will notice. I'm just going to cover myself all up and wrap myself, and here I am on stage, but I'm still hiding. And
I know,
so
right?
it's an unconscious, but it's oftentimes, really seeded into, once again, that element of, like you said, the believing that you have to believe that you're enough and that it doesn't matter if my arms were jiggly or even if they weren't, it was only in my head, right? It was
Yeah, yeah,
still
yeah.
okay. It was still
Right,
okay. And so the standing out part means being willing to be seen.
right.
And so that's so important.
Yeah,
But
I have something to add there. You were hiding the truth, and like you said, it can be in your head, made up or whatever. But if your arms weren't making you feel good about your arms or whatever, but it's kind of boils down to hiding the truth sometimes, and the truth will always be known. I love the story in Women Who Run with the Wolves, one of the fairy tales where there were two rabbis and they murdered some blonde woman and they buried her twice as deep or more than anyone would need to be buried, and her hair grew up out of the soil and grew and wound its way through the woods into the town. And the bottom line of that fairy tale is the truth will always be known. Have you heard that one?
yes, yes,
Yeah. So,
yes.
and I remember, and I might have shared this with you, going to an event I had no idea what the coaching world was. I just hired a coach. 2 weeks later, I'm at this huge event, and my coach had said, "You're hiding," and I'm like, "Really?" And I came out of the bathroom, and my name tag was flipped over and halfway under my vest, and I saw that in the mirror, and I went, "Okay, I am hiding." Like a physical evidence of it appeared.
Sure, sure,
It was
sure.
cool.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's so important that this. the awareness of recognizing that the world is made for those who stand out and not those who fit in, and how we can take the brilliance that we have and just dim the light because we ourselves are uncomfortable, with it, or we don't want somebody else to be uncomfortable with how amazing we are. And so
Wow.
it's a really big piece in being able to position yourself and be attractive to others, to have that magnetic attractor factor.
Yeah. Attractor factor, no matter what, kind of that
Yeah,
gets down to that authenticity. And I love what you said, because this is where we as women really trip up, is making someone else uncomfortable.
right, right.
That's a good
Yes,
one, right?
yeah. And
Cool.
that's
All
that's
right.
it. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. And so what do you mean by asking great questions?
Asking great questions. So in standing out versus fitting in, the idea of really being able to listen to somebody means that you spend much more time focusing on not necessarily speaking about, so your hiding piece doesn't have to be about you speaking about how amazing you are. It's about being present to others. And so if I really work on asking great questions, I'm intentionally showing up in a way that values others first. My great questions are intended to give me an opportunity to listen to what the other person has to say, and to listen to opportunities to collaborate, to listen to opportunities to share resources, to listen for opportunities to be able to make a difference in the world. And so a lot of times what's fascinating to me is I've heard people speak about being attractive as knowing what to say, showing up and
Mm,
wowing people with that 30-second, elevator pitch. When the reality is, it's about being able to ask great questions so you can show up in a form of service to listen and see where the hidden opportunity might be. And that will make you stand out, because most people are so good at talking, but they're not so good at listening. So
yeah.
that's where the questions come in.
Absolutely. Very cool. I love it. Okay, so now here's the juicy stuff. Crafting your positioning statement. First, tell a little bit about positioning, what it is. Going to give us that definition, and then let's go into crafting your positioning statement.
Sure. So positioning was actually a term that was coined in 1969 by a gentleman who used the definition of positioning as an organized system to open the window to your mind. And
Hmm.
what has happened over time is that, positioning has taken on a variety of meanings. But he actually co-wrote a book in 1981 with a man, Al Reese, talking about this, talking about positioning, opening the window to your mind. And so positioning is something that when you look at standing out versus fitting in, it's critical that in understanding the conversation dynamics, let's say, you are asking great questions, you're ultimately looking for somebody's mind to open. And most people's minds are closed to keep them safe.
Right.
Nobel Prize winning scientist Daniel Kahneman says that each person experiences over 20,000 individual moments a day. So there's information overload and there's, sensory overload. So right now you and I are talking, but there's things going around in the background that somebody might be noticing in their own, wherever they're listening, plus, what's going on the screen. And then there's the list in the back of the mind that's saying, do I need to pick up broccoli on the way home, or I have to remember to do this? And even if it's sort of, even if, 13% is conscious, we have to acknowledge, that 87%, 88%, that's the unconscious mind that's actually having activity. So this idea of being able to craft a positioning statement is being able to, when you actually are speaking outside of asking great questions, in order to stand out, you want to be able to do it in a way that opens people's minds to be able to see who you are, that authentic, valuable self. And a lot of times people just speak in normal, in like, what do I say, just
Sound bites
the
or
No, the unconscious, they just, it's
Ah,
sort of, how are you? I'm
ah,
great. We rehearse phrases that are meaningless. And so that's somewhat what happens in those 30-second blurbs. And a positioning statement is designed to use a very powerful, um, a powerful verb to speak in a way that somebody can at least be interested enough to hear who you are. And if you do that with conversations, there you're more likely to foster connection. You're more likely to stand out because it isn't those cookie cutter phrases, that are, that so many people have in
mhm.
really autopilot.
Right. Do you have an example? Can you think of something as an example of a positioning statement or?
Sure. I keep
Okay.
using the 30-second intro, and so I'll use something like that in conversation or dialogue. So one of the most common questions that people get asked is, what do you do? Right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
so many people are like, geez, how can I wow somebody? I really want to wow them, and so they're taught to say all sorts of things that are clever or, really designed to wow the person. And one of the things that I say is ditch your pitch. You don't want to be pitchy, but you do
Right.
want to understand that a positioning statement allows the person's mind to open. And the
Mm.
mind cannot hear certain words, and the mind cannot especially hear adjectives and hear the phrase "I am." The brain actually falls asleep and powers down. So when you use something that's a very powerful verb, you actually engage the brain because it's curious. And this may be in the form of, maybe a short story. So when somebody says, let's use that example, what do you do? A positioning statement may be something like, well, Susie called me up and asked me to work with her because she was struggling with her boss about her being a better leader and feeling like the world's best kept secret. And so what I do is, I work with women who are really feeling like they're unnoticed, they're unnoticed, or they're the world's best kept secret, to teach them how to be seen, heard, and rewarded with bigger opportunities. And so what wakes the brain up is a short story, and I mean a short
Mhm.
story, less than a sentence. And of course, we're doing this off the fly, so one of the elements of, crafting your positioning statement, as I said, is that short story, that really short, it's almost a sentence and that's it. And then really moving into what would be a power verb. So I used I teach. And it really is about making sure that the brain can hear that. And so you're not looking to convince somebody to buy something. You're not looking to be able to pitch them. All you're looking is for their brain to be open enough to be able to receive you and to receive, your authentic self. That's it. And a lot of times that there's a confusion that I have to do something or get something or make something happen. And so a positioning statement is really just the ability to begin that authentic connection by opening someone's brain.
Positioning is not visibility.
Nope.
Nope. So tell us
Not at
more.
all. If you and I, decide to be, if I decide to, turn around and continue the conversation the entire time like this, you could still see me, right? I mean, you'd still see me, but I wouldn't be positioned right. I would be, positioned looking off someplace else. And so, visibility is, being able to be seen, but being positioned well is that somebody else can see you, hear you, perceive what it is that you actually are about, feel into, your authenticity. And so it's not, it's not the same. Visibility to me is just the seeing part. It's not all of the other elements. And that's what I think is really magical about it. And this is the element of studying, what draws people to you, studying that, there's something uniquely wonderful about me as a person and uniquely wonderful about you, Linda. I mean, like when you laugh, your laugh is infectious.
Ah,
When you smile, there is just something something about, you. And there is an element for me, I always say that, my knockout feature is not humor. I mean, I can be funny, but mine, that's not my knockout feature. And so we have different pieces that make people comfortable around us, and understanding what draws people to us and using that as a tool, not just to be visible, but to really position ourselves so that when somebody's mind is open enough to see us, that they really see us, who we are. And I think a lot of times there's so much out there on being attractive that you should learn about other people versus learning about yourself and about what really draws what really draws people, to you.
Right, and you don't learn that from your head. You learn that from,
No.
and thank you for, saying that. You learn that from others, and it's actually their responses and reactions. You can kind of pick up on that. But to have somebody actually just tell you flat out, what you just said to me, it's like, well, and I've heard that before. So it's always good to hear that from people. So just remembering in almost complimenting people, letting them know what is attracting you to them. And they may turn right around and, say, well, what is it, that attracted, whatever, the vice versa, mercy part of it. So that, you both learn. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And if you're not sure, ask. I mean, if you're curious, that's what the studying part is, the research. We do research, so much research on other people, who an ideal client might be, or what a great organization might be to work in. But how much research do we do on ourselves? I think very few people research themselves. That could be assessments, that could be asking the question, it could be, like you say, paying attention when somebody gives you a compliment. That all matters, to be able to use that as a positioning device to draw people to you. Because if it's what people notice and see, it's your knockout.
Yep, I love it. What do you understand as your knockout?
Love. Love
Ah,
is my knockout. I can be a very serious person, and so
mhm.
that's why I think that's the reason why I notice like your sort of playfulness and your humor, because it's something that um, that is, when we look at, perfect in my imperfections, I wish that I had a little bit more of that, but that's just not that's not how I'm wired. And
Mm.
so, and there's the law enforcement. And so for me, I'm very, oftentimes very serious and very focused, and here's the next, step and the next. And so, what I really, what meets that all out, and what allows me to really connect with other people, is that I have such deep compassion for
Yeah.
human beings and their
Yes.
frailties, and such love, that what I want somebody to leave with after they're with me is to really understand how perfect they are. Like, I want to leave them, even if it's somebody I've met the first time, even if it's, the airline agent checking me in, or the maid who comes to clean my room in a hotel. I want them to leave feeling loved, feeling better off than when they first came into contact with me. And it's something that I've really worked on in my life, because that wasn't the case,
Yeah.
years ago. And so for me, that I think, and it continues to come back and be validated by clients. It continues to come back where I had somebody say to me not that long ago, it was last month, a client said, and she's been in business for, like 35 years. And she said, I've had other coaches, I've worked with other people. And she said, I have just never felt so supported in all of my life. And she does coaching herself. And it was such an authentic comment that just, brought tears to my eyes, because it's, it's what I want. I want somebody to just feel so so held and so supported that they are absolutely perfect. No matter if they get their 5 projects done during the week, or no matter if they, met all those goals that they listed or that we worked on, it doesn't really matter. That everything is in divine right timing, and they're absolutely perfect. And so love, 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 love. I'm sorry for
Yeah.
talking so much about it, but
No,
that's
no,
mine.
it's cool. Yeah, it's like we see you, we love you, and we know you are perfect.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay, so 7 areas of positioning. We'll scoot through those, but you've got 7 areas of positioning. What are
So
those?
yeah, and this is just, really quick with this. It's really that, there's positioning statements, and then there's also positioning stories. So once again, in alignment with having people's minds be open, when you're in conversation, it's really the stories that you tell that people remember. Very few
Yes.
people remember the facts, right? They remember the stories.
Yep.
And so I could give you all the list of credentials and things that transitioned into my business, and I could tell you about the master's degree, but who really cares? It's really more the interesting story about how I literally left 6 figures for no figures to open up a business because, I was getting married, and, I wanted to be able to be the freedom and flexibility of doing that. So,
Right.
it's the story that matters. And so there's 7 areas of which to create positioning stories around. And those areas are: 1, your own hero's journey, whatever your story has been from tragedy to triumph. The second thing is either your clients' results or, your clients' stories, being able to share those. The third thing is, your certifications or your licenses, but building a story around that, right? Using the verb,
Yeah.
and, using a short story. Another one is community involvement. Number 4 be community involvement. And so where are you involved that you can, once again, tell a story around that to position yourself and position your expertise and bring your humanity into there. Another area is media. So most people don't even realize where they've been quoted or what they've written or what they've done. Even if it's in social media, it doesn't matter. What is it that that you can use as far as media to use to position yourself. And then the other thing is something that you've done that's been a major accomplishment. So maybe you've run a marathon, maybe you've done something that's really big. And so being able to use that as an element to position yourself. So it's sort of like your big, I had a client who climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And
cool.
One of the things I said is, that's something you should be leading with all the time in conversation. I have another one who has a master sailing license and has, sailed all over the West Coast, up and down the coast from, Alaska all the way down in Mexico. And so, it's just different things that, as your own captain, wow, what a great deal. And so people they're not going to get to know those things about you, right? Especially let's say in conversation, the who am I, or I mean, not the who am I, what do you do? People that doesn't, they're so, let's create the here's the thing I'm going to sell you. No. Tell me a story about you. Tell me something really, personal and vulnerable that allows me to be able to be attracted to you. So that's right. That's the
That's what I call the relationship marketing piece, because people buy people. They really do want to know you, the real you, the authentic you, the raw you. Yeah, and and if I can't relate to you, then I'm not going to buy from you. And it doesn't matter what you're selling. And if I can relate to you, I don't even care if you're selling junk. So you have this amazing gift, Lisa, the attractor factor. Tell us more about that.
It is an amazing gift. And, it just always makes me smile. I'm having so much fun with you.
I love it.
The attractor factor. So the attractor factor, there's 2 pieces to it. One is, we've talked so much about connection and about, the power that comes from connecting. So I wrote this report about the 7 keys to mastering the art of connection. And with regards to that, there's a lot of exercises that you can do that allow you to take these elements of positioning and have them show up in business meetings, conferences, whether you're networking. It doesn't really make a difference, but they're the same basic principles, and how you can actually implement the action items. And I've had people come back and say, wow, here's the contract that I got from that. So
Cool.
there's it's really about attracting big opportunities. So there's that.
Nice.
There's that. And then the other thing is, I mentioned earlier about my event. And so normally my event, if you were to go online and look at my event, you would find that the tickets for the event would be $1,497 and for 3 days. And it is definitely worth every penny of it, because it's sort of like, going and getting your MBA crash course through leadership in this very short period of time and making some amazing connections in the room. And so for our event, I am going to gift you with a ticket to that event next year. So those
Wow.
are the two big events and two big pieces. And like I said, this is actually something that I have only ever done one time before, but truly because of our connection, which has been an online connection and one that has grown. I am genuinely honored to be here and share authentically in this conversation. So,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. Wow, that's just fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, you'll definitely want to take advantage of that. So go back to your email, and below Lisa's picture and bio is a link that you'll click to go out and opt in for this amazing, really gift package that she's giving. That's so generous. Thank you very much. I
Thank
didn't realize
you.
you were doing that extra piece. That's awesome.
I
All
did.
right. So we did it.
You
Yay. Thank you
did it.
so much. And is there anything you'd like to say in summary? I just love you know, I have a thing about you kind of that elevator pitch idea is really your story of transformation. So again, a story, and then I asked people, well, who was that person that just like really jazzed you? And sometimes they come in thinking I'm asking like for a mentor, and I'm not. It's like, who's that person that just left you with that feeling of, yes, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it doesn't have to be what you're doing now, but they left you with that feeling, and that gets you to your highest vibration. So I teach something a little different. So it's really neat to hear the way that you're teaching and approaching. And it's been really fun to learn from you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been such a blessing. Such a blessing. Thank
Yeah,
you.
same here. Absolutely. All right, my dear. Well, time to say goodbye. Bye, Lisa.
Bye.